as far as fathers go, because that's something our heart is largely toward in this show is men as fathers. Like, there really aren't, everybody likes to think that there are all these extra paths you can take in life. And it's like, really, you get married, you have a family. These are the key things that have to happen in order for society and humanity to continue on. So for fathers or men who want to be fathers, what practical steps can be taken now to invest deeply in their sons and shape them in a healthy masculine way for that next generation, so that we don't have that again? Because obviously we still have to work, we still have to do all these things. So what is the solution?
Yes. Again, the history shows, it gives us a lot of answers. For example, we all know that today fathers are mocked and ridiculed in the media.
Oh,
They're always the butt of the joke.
Big time. Yeah. It's amazing. I share that with people and they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, you didn't notice? Yeah. I mean, they're weak. They're misdirected. They're silent and they're stupid. They're always stupid, and they're almost always lazy.
Yep.
Yes.
In media, fathers.
One of my sons loved the Berenstain.
Especially.
In the commercials, Berenstain Bears, the children's literature. I don't if you're familiar with those books. The father's always the bumbling idiot.
Always.
And even the kids are smarter than the dad.
Totally.
So where did that come from? Again, when men were taken out of the home, for the first time, they were not really in touch with the family dynamics anymore, compared to actually living and working with their family. And so they didn't know their children as well. They didn't know their needs, their interests, and so on. And again, already in the 19th century, you see the same literature. They begin to portray fathers as irrelevant and incompetent and out of touch and superfluous, not really necessary for the family. Mm-hmm. And so if we know that that's how it started, the solution, of course, then has to be reconnecting fathers to their sons. And this is a difficult one because you can't, undo the Industrial Revolution. But the pandemic actually was very inspiring because Harvard University did a study. And by the way, this is not in the book because it's more recent. Harvard did a study in which they said a lot of fathers worked from home during the pandemic. And their finding was, during the pandemic, 68% of fathers said they got closer to their children, and they don't want to lose that.
Yeah, I read that somewhere. That's a beautiful stat.
And so what it means, too, is that fathers do want to be involved with their kids. We tend to get the idea, the modern message is that men get most of their fulfillment and sense of identity from their work. But if you ask them on anonymous surveys, in my book, I give some anonymous surveys, and then they'll admit that they get their identity and sense of fulfillment just as much from being a father. Wow. And we think, mothers are more into motherhood than fathers are. Well, and we've been taught that. Margaret Mead, the famous anthropologist, said, motherhood is natural, biologically based. Fatherhood is a social construction. Well, it turns out this is not true. They're doing studies now on the biochemical changes that happen in a man when he becomes a father. They actually grow new neurons in the brain. One psychologist says, you grow a dad brain. Wow. You grow a dad brain because you actually grow new neurons and your oxytocin rises. Yeah. Oxytocin is the bonding hormone. We always knew that when mothers give birth, the oxytocin rises. Yeah. But now they're finding it happens to fathers as well.
Really?
It's stimulated by the tactile sense. So you have to actually be holding and cuddling and playing with the child. But if you do that, the father's oxytocin rises so that he bonds biochemically with his child.
Far out.
And the latest research, by the way, this was really surprising. A man's oxytocin is rising all through the 9 months of his wife's pregnancy.
Super cool.
Really?
So that men are biochemically primed to be fathers. It's not that fatherhood is only a social construction. It's just as much biologically based. God has equipped men with the biochemistry that they need to be strong, committed, loving, engaged fathers.
This explains why I craved root beer floats from Sonic while my wife was pregnant.
That's exactly it.
I had probably 3 or 4 a week.
Yeah. It's so true. I can attest to this, though, because I have 3 kids. My youngest is 8 years old. It's girl, boy. So my only boy. When he was born, I worked for a tech company, and in that company, I got 4 months of paternity leave, which a lot of people will be like, oh, that's stupid. You don't need that. But in that time, I felt like I had all of this like deeper bonding than I ever got with my girls, even though we're really close. But it just was this special thing. I'm like, I get to be here. I don't have anything taking my time or attention. And to this day, we're really close. We're really tight. You know, and so it makes sense now. It was the oxytocin.
It was. And they have some studies. You know, when I started writing my book, I had the same thought that you just mentioned. I felt, you know, the baby sleeps most of the time. And when he's awake, he needs to feed, you know. So I thought, I didn't think there was anything to paternity leave. And then I read the studies and they found just what you just said. They said men who get a chance to have paternity leave do bond more closely with their newborns. And that lasts the whole rest of their life.
Yeah.
And we know
that's the best.
And we know that father involvement with their children is like the key to success in life, success in school, you know, confidence in your friendships.
Love it.
And even following the parents into their faith commitment. There was a really good study, as a 35-year longitudinal study. It won all kinds of awards. So it was a really good study. And it was asking the question, how do children follow in their parents' footsteps in terms of their faith commitment? And they found 2 surprising things. One is fathers matter more than mothers.
Whoa.
When I tell my students
Man, you could
that,
get in some trouble saying that, Nancy.
That's it. When I tell my students, the female students all say, that's not fair.
That's not fair.
Yeah, it's just the data.
I think fair
that was
sometimes.
the fact.
Yeah. Wow.
But, it's not that mothers don't have influence, of course, but I don't think I remember the numbers. It's 68% for fathers, it's 40-something for mothers in terms of the impact that they have on their children's faith commitment. And the second one is, though, it has to be a warm, loving relationship. In other words, if a father is a pillar of the church, you know, a moral exemplar, has perfect theology, but he's perceived as cold, distant, and authoritarian, then the kids won't follow him.
Nope, they will not.
That's heavy. That's really heavy.
Wow. You know, you mentioned, I think, when the father left the home, the children found themselves, or at least men or boys, I think you said undisciplined and wild. And I couldn't help but think, I think that lost needs to be added to that list. Because I think maybe boys growing up that worked along their father just intuitively felt like they knew what they were going to do with their life. And then me being my age now, growing up, my dad was out of the house. He pastored a mega church, and so he was gone a lot. And I lost my identity in knowing what I wanted or needed or dreamed of even doing in my life. If you would have just said, well, if you could dream, you know, what would I would have to say, I don't actually know yet. I don't know. And that lasted till I was about 28, not 13. And so, so praise God that, you know, things change, and the perfect story was written where I get to participate in God's timing with that now. Yeah.
We know now, you know, how harmful it is for fathers to be out of the home entirely, right? That the boys who have no father in the home do worse in school, more likely to be addicted to drugs and alcohol, more likely to end up behind bars. But it actually started with fathers being out of the home most of the day, you know, because technically they were still home, but we're so used to fathers being out of the home, we don't realize how traumatic it was at the time. At the time, 19th century, there's all these books and articles written on the loss of the father. Yeah. Here's a book that said, the father is the mainstay, you know, of the home, and yet he's never there. Or the person who was the most influential woman of the 19th century, the head of the Christian Women's Temperance Union, puts it this way. She said, God is our father, and yet the prototype of the divine is out of the house from Sunday to Sunday. They didn't have Saturdays off yet. So she was talking about how our young people, especially our boys, going to connect with God when the prototype of God is not even there through most of the week.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of traumatic writings, they really experienced it in a way that we've kind of lost touch with.
Yeah.
One historian put it this way: boys lost their connection to the adult male world because, the father obviously was their main connection to the adult world. And then another a psychologist puts it this way. He called it industrial fatherlessness because, technically men were in the home, but there was a kind of industrial fatherlessness in the sense that they weren't there, for most of the day. So I do spend some time in talking about solutions.
Good.
I talk about various ways that men can tweak the workplace and have more time with their families. After the pandemic, a lot of men said, they preferred to keep some sort of at least hybrid situation where they could work part-time from home or remote work. I interviewed, a lot of them are personal stories where I interviewed men. One of them was a graduate student of mine who's married to an IT professional in California, and he came home during the pandemic. And when I talked to him, he said, well, since I was home, I decided I would be the parent who made lunch for the family. And because I was home, I could take the kids to soccer practice. I could be involved in the homeschooling. And then he said this: the time I used to spend commuting to work, I now spend praying with my wife.
Wow.
And I thought, this is what we need to hear. Just anecdotes, just stories of men who've done that, who found ways to work around the workplace. Yeah. He said, I'm never going back to 40 hours in a cubicle.
Good for him.
So good.
I love it. Your kids need you.